Hey, so in the last video we talked about some modeling stuff. We went into splitting, beveling, and things like that. And in this video we're going to be exploring Booleans. So Booleans can introduce some problems, which I will go into, how to fix them and things like that, things to watch out for. So I'll be doing that first, and then eventually I'll actually be using the Booleans and then modeling around it and things like that. I don't usually like to take this approach by talking about Booleans this early, because I would much prefer the user to know how to model first and then fix the problems. But anyways, we'll kind of do things a little bit different this time. Alright, so let's get to it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to actually have Booleans enabled, right? So if you go into your user preferences, and then you go to add-ons, just type in BOO, and that will usually get you to the bool tool. Make sure this is on, okay? Now the second thing you might want to do, especially if you're not familiar with this tool, is the set of hotkeys that it comes with. Okay, so if you press the hotkey button, it'll give you all the hotkeys right here. Now for the most part, we're going to be using control and then number pad plus, and then control number pad minus. Those are usually the ones that I like to use I guess most often. And then sometimes I'll use slice, so control number and then /. If you come from other software like Modo, which requires your objects to be volumetric or at least closed before you do a Boolean, in Blender that's not the case. Now, right now I can show you this by, for example, hiding this mirror or actually deleting it altogether, so we know that for a fact that it's not there. And if we draw a cube and then we shape it to how we want, right? So let's just say I move it like so. Okay, and then I shape it. And then I'm going to try to Boolean. But here's the thing. The first thing that you should notice right now is that right now I am modeling within this object. And you cannot do a Boolean but basically you can't do a Boolean onto itself. So in order for this to work, I'm going to have to separate this object out. Now, usually what I would do is I would tab out and then I would create this cube. But in this case, I wanted to make the example of how to, like if you've made the mistake of making a cube while you are still in the edit mode of an object, what do you do next? Well, what you could do is you could press L to select all the connected faces, right? And actually you want it to be, first of all, in face mode. So press L, and then you press P, and then by selection. So press P, or selection right here, and now you selected it onto its own object. So you can see that no longer do we see the actual wireframe around this object, we only see it around here. So now when you press tab, you are exiting that object. So first, select the object that you're going to be cutting with, and then the object that you're going to cut away from. And when we press control and minus, what's going to happen is there's going to be a modifier that's going to be added to that object. But before we do that, let's actually make some changes to this cutter. So I'm going to tab in, make sure I'm in face mode. I'm just going to move it closer. Same thing with this, and then I'm going to go into edge mode and do a little bevel. And then I'm going to select Alt, right click. And here's the thing, because I did it on this edge here, I know for a fact that it's actually selected all the way around because the polygon is filled. And if you watched my previous video on selections, you would know that Blender only fills a polygon if all the vertices and edges and elements that belong to that polygon have in fact been selected. So they are selected, it filled this selection, and now Control B and bevel, and make sure you scroll up to get enough segments to make that bevel nice and round. And now when I tab out, I'm going to shift, right click, and control minus, and it will in fact Boolean. And as you can see, it Booleaned it no problem. Now the cool thing about the Boolean inside of Blender is that it is in fact a modifier, right? So if I select this object, you'll notice right away that there's a modifier called Boolean, and its mode is set to difference and solver to carve, and the package 01 is this object over here. When I select it, you'll notice that right here it says package 01 or 001. If I select this one here, it just says package. Right? So this object is called package, this one package 001. So this basically made the connection between these two objects. Now, the reason why this is important, because now if I, for example, move this object, you'll notice that right away it is, in fact, interactive. I can move it around, scale it, do whatever I want. But the cooler thing about this tool is the fact that now, if I press edit, right, and then let's just say I hover over a part of it, and then I do a tool duplicate, and I constrain to Y in my case, okay, and then I tab out, you'll notice that now, even if I change the object itself, it's still linked to this shape, right? So what I just did is I duplicated polygons, but I didn't actually duplicate the object. Now, that's the difference, right? But here's the thing. If you're going to be doing that kind of operation where you're duplicating and moving things around, if you, for example, scale by -half, so let me show you that right now. If I do another duplicate, okay, but first of all, I have to enter a tab, right? I hover over the part that I want to select more faces of, or all the connected faces. So in this case, I hover over this part, press L, and then I do a duplicate, and I press X, and now I'm going to want to scale on the -x axis, so you can see the X is pointing here. So I will press S, move the mouse to interactively scale, but I want to constrain the scale only to X. So I press X to do that, and now if you look at the bottom left of my screen, you'll notice that the scale values are changing. I'm going to press Control to constrain it to 0.1, and when I get to -1, I want to left click, and now I know that I have in fact mirrored the object. But here's the problem. When I now try to move this object over, and I tab out to see the end result, you'll notice that on this side, it has in fact subtracted from the object, but on this side, it didn't work. Now, the reason why it didn't work is because the normals, when you scale the object by -1, the normals are reversed. So I'm going to enter the object again, and now under shading and UVs, I'm going to go and flip the direction of the normals, right? So here it says normals, flip direction. And now when I tab out, you'll notice that it works. And again, if I move this up and down, it works all the way throughout for every part of the object. Now, before we continue working on this further, because right now, this entire drone is in the way. So what I want to do is I want to move this package onto a different layer so I can easily hide this drone and work on this package. So let me select the package, the cutter, and then if I press the hotkey M, I'm going to see move to layer, and I'm just going to select this. And now you can see that the package has in fact disappeared. But now if we move our mouse all the way down to here, you'll notice that there's a dot here and it's gray, right? Because my selection has moved from there, and my selection right now is on this layer. So if I just select this, you'll now notice that there is in fact my package, and the drone has now disappeared. Now if I want to have both the drone and this thing selected, what I have to do is I have to press Shift and then select the other layer, and now you have the ability to actually work on both objects. So now if I just left click on any one of the layers, I can switch between my visibilities just like that. Okay, so far what we've done is we've done only a subtractive layer, but now I want to add to this object, right? I want to add some bumps to this. So you know what, let me just very quickly press A to clear the selection here, make a cube, and position this cube into place. Alright, so now that we have these objects here, I'm going to make sure that this object is selected here, right, these little bumps. Shift, right click on the package, and then this time what we're going to do is apply the Boolean but slightly differently, right? So Control Shift B on your keyboard, and then you're going to get bool tool operators. Now there's two sections to it, right? I mean, like, you'll notice that there's a difference and then brush difference. There's a union, brush union, and so on. Now here's the thing. If you do an auto Boolean, what it's going to do is it's going to apply the Boolean to the object and then automatically delete the modifier, right? But if you do a Control Shift B to get back into this menu, now if you do a brush Boolean, what it's going to do is it's going to add a modifier to your existing object. Okay, so if we now do a union, what you'll notice is that now you have this being added to this object, but you'll notice that the package now has a boolean number 1, a boolean number 2, right? And then one of the objects here is, that's booleaning with, is the package 001 and cube, right? So this right here is the package 0001, or 001, and then this one is the cube, right? And we see that it worked. Now that we are starting to get a few more objects that we're working with, it's starting to make the viewport just a little bit more distracting. Because in some cases I might want to preview how this object, this package, looks without having all these different brushes visible. So sometimes it's useful to keep working with the layers, right? So in my case, I'm just going to right-click on this, right-click on that, so select all my brushes, and then press M, and then just move it to a new layer. And then this way, I know that those objects have been moved to a layer, and nothing has really changed as far as my scene is concerned. It's just that I've temporarily assigned them to a different layer, and by default making them invisible. So now I'm looking at my package, everything's alright. Now if I shift left click on the brushes, you'll notice that they are right here, right? And I can continue on with my work. At the same time, if I want to see how it looks in relation to the rest of the model, I can shift left click on that layer over there, and there you go. And if I want to hide those brushes, well then it's as easy as just hiding them. Shift left click to toggle them off, and then away we go. Right? I want to go back, select these two layers, and I'm right back to work. Next I want to add a slice through this object. And I'm going to do that by creating yet another object, right? So a cube, and I'm going to place it where I need it. Enter the edit mode. Select the top and bottom faces, scale on the Z until it's just the right thickness that I need right there. Move it until it's fairly equally distanced from top to bottom. And of course the way I'm going to see that is by pressing 5 and then 1. And that's pretty close. Okay, so now that I have this cube, and the distance between this face and here is pretty equal to this one here, I'm going to now want to slice this cube away from this one here. So first I want to exit the edit mode, and then right away shift and right click to select the package. Control Shift B to get you into the bool tool operators again, and then brush slice, and this will slice this object into multiple pieces. Now here's the thing, I can right click to select the one portion of the model, and you'll notice that that this line here breaks away from here. The reason why is because now there's another object that's been created. Okay, so if I right click on this one, you'll notice it says package 002, but if I select this one, it just says package. Okay, now they both have the same modifiers applied by default, so do note that. So when you're working now, you actually have more than one object, but they all share the same common Boolean modifiers, which is good because now I can just keep modeling on these modifiers, and they'll automatically update themselves to their respective objects that they're being booleaned from, or to, or whatever. So now I have the option to shape this Boolean object into whatever it is that I want. So I'm back into tab after selecting the object, and then into face, and then Control Shift right click to get into the edge slice here. And then of course once I'm in the slide mode, I'm just going to right click to make sure that it's right down the center. Control B to get into bevel, and then I want to select the edge loops, so this one here and this one here. So Alt right click to select the first one, and Shift Alt right click on the second one. Control B to bevel again. And now I'm going to go into face mode, select the top and bottom face, scale on the Z axis by pressing Z while I'm scaling. Go back into edge mode and select the first edge loop, Shift Alt right click to select the second, third, and fourth. And now I want to bevel, so I'm going to Control B to bevel and up the scroller to add some roundness numbers, right? So I want to add some extra divisions. And now when I press tab to exit the edit mode and I select this object, that like any one of the package slices, you'll notice right away that now it has a shape. Very good. Now you're seeing me model this way, and I'm not usually modeling this way, but this is just more of a kind of like introduction to Booleans and, you know, modeling in general. So I'm trying to make, you know, some examples of how things work. I mean, I sometimes do like to vary, you know, how I model, right? So I do like to kind of keep myself on my toes, I guess. And this is kind of one of those cases. And so right now what I'm going to show you guys is how to, like once you start making these or expanding on these objects, right? So if I select the subtractive brush and then tab right into it, and if this is still selected or if any part of it is still selected, press A to clear the selection. And while I am in this object, I'm going to select cube. And now I'm going to want to continue subtracting from this object. But after doing a slice, if I keep doing, or if, at least if I attempt at doing what it is that I want to do, you'll notice that I want to create a hole between this slice and that slice. It's kind of hard to tell where that differentiation is, right? Like where one object begins and where another one ends. So if I now press tab, you'll notice that there's a hole in there, and that's all great and good. But again, I want to be able to slice into both the top and the middle section of this package. So what I would want to do is I would want to assign a different material. So I'm going to tab out and I'm going to select the middle portion of this object, go into the material pane, or like so, and then change from data to object, and also go into the N menu here and just get rid of matcap, because that kind of overrides everything in your scene. So now that I have this, I'm going to very simply make a new material and give it a different color. Okay, and as you can see, now I know where one object ends and where another one begins. So now I'm going to go back into this subtractive object, and I'm going to place it exactly where it is that I meant to place it. And all I'm looking at here right now is just kind of the distance from the top to the middle and from the middle to the bottom, to just try to place it somewhat equal distance. And again, if you want to see where the middle is, go into an orthographic view, because at least that way you're not going to get any kind of distortion. I talked earlier about the slicing of the object, right? This top object being a little bit different than the middle one. Now, it looks as if right now, as if this object is such, and then this one has the top and the bottom section. But when you actually go into the tab to go into edit mode, you'll notice that this one looks like so, and the middle one, if I tab in, you'll notice that it looks exactly the same, minus the fact that it has a different material on it. Tab out of it. Now the reason why you have different results is because their modifiers are set to something different. The Boolean brushes that you have here, the objects that you're using to Boolean with, are the exact same. They're shared between the two objects, but this cube, instead of it being set to difference like on this one it's set to intersect, right? So go into the modifier, select this object, go to the bottom, it's set to difference, and for this one over here, it is set to intersect. That is literally the only difference between these two. The thing that makes Blender's modifiers so cool is that they give you a sort of limited procedurality to your modeling. It's kind of like the modeling stack inside of 3D Studio Max. So right now I have you know, the top shells and the center section, but I want to give it some thickness. So if I, for example, click on the bottom or top object here, and I go into the modifier menu, so follow my mouse, all over to the modifiers, and I add a modifier called solidify, you'll see this. Go to the bottom and apply some actual thickness. And let's just say I want the wall to be about that thick. I guess that's okay, but I mean, it starts to kind of fall apart in some areas, right? I mean, this is not exactly what I wanted, right? I mean, it gives some pretty ugly results. And quite frankly, I don't want any of these shapes to be on the inside, or, you know, these keyholes either. So what can I do? Well, after applying the modifier, the actual order of operation matters, right? So if I go, follow my mouse, if I go to the, and you know what, let me expand this a little bit, to the solidify, and to the up arrow over here, I can actually move the modifier up. So as you can see, the result changed a little bit. Let me do that again. Oh, wow. So some of the shapes are actually being removed. They're not really being removed. They're just being booleaned after the solidify, so the holes are not applied. Let me do that again. And as you can see now, the solidify is on the top and all these extra shapes have disappeared. They're still applied, however, but they're applied to the object after the solidify has been applied. And this is very important. I'm actually going to do the same thing over here. So let me add a modifier, solidify, and once again I'm going to move it up, up, and up to go to the top. And now I have some thickness, and of course I can give it some actual thickness. And there we go. So now this object has thickness. This entire case, this package, is ready for me to start modeling on the inside. For practicality, to prevent this top shell actually moving side to side, you would want some kind of keys to lock in this top shell from the bottom. Now this is nothing to really do with modeling or technicalities as far as Blender goes, but this is more or less a usability thing in real life, right? So if I want to make sure that this top shell locks perfectly onto this bottom portion of the model, then you would probably have some kind of wedged keys where this item can slide right into this one and make its way, you know, you can kind of roughly put it down, and then it'll perfectly lock into place because of the wedged keys. So that's what we're going to be creating in this chapter here, or this part of the video. Now I want to press 7 to go to the top, and then 5 to go into orthographic, and then go follow my mouse, go into create plane. Now if you are in perspective, right, and you view the model like that, you'll notice that, yeah, sure, there's a bit of a change here, but because it's a plane, I'm not really worried about any kind of distortion, right? If it was any kind of other model like a cube or something like that, then as I'm, you know, navigating around, you'll notice that this, for example, this cube here is changing shape as navigating around. In that kind of case, if I was going to model on a cube, then yeah, sure, I might want to go into orthographic, and no matter how I navigate, the view is always, you know, perfectly orthographic. But when you're working on a plane, it's flat, and you're aiming exactly on it, so I'm not really worried about perspective being on or not. Just a side note. Okay, now we're working on this plane. So, first of all, go into Edge, or Edit, Edge, Scale, and I'm not really I want to kind of make sure that this has a 45-degree angle, but I'm going to scale this and that together, and then I'm going to make sure that I am scaling on Y, and I'm going to scale this until, and I can't really mention it yet, but almost got it. So scale again, and then go on, press Y, constrain, and okay, there you go. So basically what I wanted to have here is I wanted to make sure that this line is perfectly smooth. And what that means and this is from experience. Basically, when a line is perfectly smooth, it's going to be either perfectly straight in a horizontal or vertical, or at a 45-degree angle, right? So I wanted a perfectly 45-degree angle here. If I was to scale again and then do a Y, you'll notice that there's some stepping in there. So without anti-aliasing, you'll get some stepping. And so sometimes not having anti-aliasing turned on is actually useful, because you can tell roughly what a 45-degree angle looks like. Okay, so now I have that done. I'm going to go into face, and I'm going to now want to duplicate this on the x-axis. So go into Tools, Duplicate, and press the X to constrain, and move it, I don't know, about that far, I guess. And then do the same thing and duplicate, and now I think right around there should be enough. Now the reason why I want to do that is because I'm going to want to scale this on Y to invert it, and my placement was based on, like as far as me telling where the middle is when I look at this point and this point, the length here is about the same as from this point to this point here. Okay, so I can kind of roughly tell where the midpoint is. Now I'm going to scale, but I'm going to scale and constrain on Y, and then I want to press Control to snap, right? And I want to make sure my negative value is, I'm scaling basically by -1, and if you go to the bottom left of the screen, you'll notice that it says scale -1 along Y, or along global Y. And then press and let go. And now you can tab out, and if you ever have this thing here where you're in blue, it just means that you're in, what do you call it, weight painting mode. Just Control tab to get out of it. Okay, so basically, and if you ever get into that, right, you can tell that you're in weight painting mode, because right here, if you go to the bottom left-ish, here you see weight paint. If I press Control tab again, I'm back in object mode. Okay, so press A to get out of any kind of selection and navigate around, and you'll notice that there is a slight hue shift change here, and same thing here. Now, once again, this is pretty much exactly what we had with the Boolean problems, right? Where we had a negative normal affecting the Boolean in a negative way. This is the exact same thing. If I now, first of all, you want to fix that, okay? Because if you don't fix it, here's what's going to actually happen, okay? If I now go into edit mode and I press select all and I go to extrude, well, actually, that works. Huh, interesting. Normally, what would happen in most other 3D applications is that you'd have one going one way, one going another way, one going another way. And I think it has to do with the fact that right now I'm using active element, so it's all going into the same direction. It's either that or local. So if I go to local, let me try extruding again. Nope, still works. Which is interesting, because sometimes you actually want that behavior. Individual elements. Okay, there we go. So if you go to individual elements, it'll extrude differently, and that's all based because of the fact that you have what do you call it? Normals going in different directions. So if I undo that, and then I just select only the center polygon, and then I go into shading UVs, I can flip the direction, and now my problem will go away, just like that. So now I want to select all these and extrude upwards. And then, now, I want to go into individual origins and scale them like that. Okay, so now, this shape here will be additive to the center portion of the model, but it'll be subtractive from the top shell. Now, I have to somehow fit it into the actual, into the package. And now we have to get these inside of the walls. So first, let's scale them. But wait, I'm in individual mode again. I have to turn that off. So go back, well, again, follow my mouse over to here and just turn on the either medium point or active element, either or. You'll pretty much get the same result, right? So if I go to medium point, it'll go to the center, and otherwise it'll go to the actual origin of the object. So anyways, in this case, I am going to do just that and move those faces, those polygons into here. Now here's the thing. Right now, it's going, like when I try to place it in there, it's kind of hard for me to tell if it's going to work or how it's going to work inside. So what you want to do at this point is, well, the good thing is you can actually navigate till you're inside the object, and this is pretty much how I'm going to work at this point. And right now we can tell that this is a little bit too big, right? Because there's really not that much clearance on either side. So I want to scale it down even more. And second of all, I want to move it closer to, well, first of all, I want to move it up. Because again, this object will be booleaned, or rather it will be added to this, but it'll be subtracted from here. So I don't really need it to intersect too much with the bottom object here. And now I can, at this point, look at it from the bottom, and I want to kind of have the same distance from here as it is from here, and it pretty much is. But the one thing that I don't like at this point is that right now this line, if you can see your colors properly, you can see that there's a line here and a line here and a line here. Now these are just our edges that change the angle of this here, of that curvature, so we're seeing some of our segments. And I want to make sure that the keys really only work from about here to about here, right? So I'm going to scale these even more until the distance from here is about the same as from the other side. And again, this becomes a little bit tricky sometimes, right? Because you have to actually zoom in a little bit further. And that distance is not exactly it, so I have to move it over slightly until it works how I like. Okay, now it pretty much works perfectly fine. Now, on to the next part. And the next part is, of course, I want to, like, these are a little too tall, so I'm just going to move them down until they work like that. Perfect. And you know what? I actually might do these in reverse. I might probably add them to the top and then make them subtractive from here, because that way, well, it'll make it more practical. Let's just keep it that way. So from my usability point of view, it'll be better. Now, sometimes if you're stuck in here, right? Sometimes you're navigating around and you know, and doing all that, and you might kind of lose your orientation. Don't worry, just zoom right out and get your kind of, you know, your orientation again, and then go back in. Now, the other thing that might kind of screw you up, I guess, is that sometimes when you're in orthographic mode, right, and I just pressed, again, 5 on my number pad, and I'm navigating around, it's kind of hard to work because, oh shit, now all of a sudden the back wall is in the way. This is why you really sometimes have to work with and sometimes without the orthographic mode. For most cases, working without orthographic and rather working in perspective actually makes a lot more sense. You can do a lot of this stuff versus if I press 5 again now, I can't really go into an object. Okay, because it completely disregards perspective or even a point of view, or at least me being within this object, right? Okay, so this shape is all good. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that sometimes if you're in, like for example, when I went back to scale these keys, right? Or rather, when I was scaling them, right? So if I press A to scale them, or rather select them, and now I want to scale. Right now, I am scaling in the median point. But if you were to, for example, by mistake, still be in individual origins, okay, and then you select all these faces and you press scale, it might appear kind of right from here, from this point of view, right? But know that what's happening here is that you're actually going to get overlapping. So when you're scaling all these objects together, you kind of want to be in median point, so that way when you're scaling, you get this effect. So now it's time to actually do the Boolean operation on these. So select the, you know, first of all, you have to be out of edit mode, so you can't be in like that. So press tab to exit. Select the key, first of all, and then navigate out, and then shift and select the top portion, like I am here. And now, Control Shift B, and make a difference. And now you want to do now first of all, you're going to get a bounding box, right? So at least you know exactly what you're selecting. So select the bounding box, zoom out, select the middle portion, Control Shift B, union. And it's going to be hard to tell what's changed. The reason being is that these brushes here, they're always in the same place. So if I try to move the actual object or geometry in any way, it's never really going to show you what the exact result is until you've finally baked the result. Okay, so what that means is that at this point, if I select this object and I move it out of here, you'll notice that, well, it's like the original, right? None of these changes have been applied to it. The keys, none of it. So I'm going to undo that. So in order for me to see the subtraction to this object in addition to this, I am actually going to have to completely batch bake all the modifiers down so I can see the final result. Now you're going to get a little bit of a problem when you try to do that, right? Because right now you have all these, what do you call it? All these modifiers applied. When I try to apply, it says report error, modifiers cannot be applied to multi-user data. Well, this sucks. So one thing that I found that actually fixes that is if you have the batch tools or batch operations installed into Blender. So with this thing here, I can now press this button and bake all that stuff down. If you want to find that batch operations, just go to user preferences. At least I'm going to go there. Don't go there yet because it's not in there by default. So if you go into here, right, and then you go to documentation, I'm pretty sure it should take me to the right page. So if you follow this link, right here, and I'm going to have it in my descriptions, by the way, so you can grab it from there. Grab this plugin, or rather the scripts, download them, and then you should get something like, where is it here? Something like that, right? So you're going to get the zip file that's going to automatically open after it's downloaded. And then you just take this folder, you cut it or copy paste into your Blender scripts. So in my case, do I have it here? Yep. So if I go to C, Program Files, Blender Foundation, Blender, the version, scripts, add-ons, just paste that folder in here. It's going to want to, complain about administrator privileges. Just if you're an administrator, you can install it, right? So say yes, it'll be installed, and then once that's all done, you'll be able to see it in here. You have to, however, boot into Blender, or rather, you have to reboot in order for it to actually take notice of the plugin. And then what you do is you just type in into your add-ons window here, into your user preferences add-ons. You type in batch, and you should see this thing here. Just enable it, and that's pretty much it, right? So once you have that set up, then what you could do is simply go into the modifier, right? So batch modifiers, it says right here. Okay, and then it says that there's a few modifiers on there. So I'm going to simply click this apply button, and it's going to apply. Then I'm going to select this portion, and I'm going to click apply. And now all the Boolean operations, the solidifies and all that stuff has been added to the object. So now if I move this out of the way, right, if I move it up, you'll notice that there is in fact now some keys that have been extracted from this, but they've been added to this object. And I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say as far as Booleans go. So for this chapter, I'm going to pretty much end it. And in the next chapter, I'm going to start cleaning up this mesh to make it more usable as far as subdivision go, right? So if I select this object right now and I go to add modifier, subdivision surface, you'll notice that there's a lot of really ugly parts to it. I'm going to have to clean that up. So let me get rid of the subdivision surface. So we're going to be adding all sorts of supporting geometry, bevels, and all that good stuff to make sure that this mesh works when I actually end up subdividing it. So in the final, it's going to look awesome. And with that said, I probably should undo. And before, do you notice that there is going to be a slight difference between this video and the last one, or in the next one rather? I'm going to go ahead and copy these keys to the other sides and the underneath, and then I'm going to boolean them out from there as well. So I'll let you guys do that on your own.